Hello, my name is Gary Moulton, and welcome to Easy Steps in Fruit Tree Pruning. Why are we making this tape? Well, for many years I've done classes at the universities on different cultural aspects in tree fruit production. And I've also done clips on gardening shows and things on hands-on pruning. And by far the most mysterious things to gardeners is the aspect of pruning. So what I'd like to do here in this tape is make it easy for you. And pruning is quite easy if you understand the basics of it. What we'll cover in this tape is the two different types of cuts you can make and which one you should be making most of the time. We'll also be covering how to train a young tree when you first plant it and bring it into production. We'll also be covering some of the modern training techniques such as Espalier, using fruit trees along your fence line. And last but not least, most often people buy a place and they have an old neglected tree and they wonder how to get that back into production as well. So we plan to cover how to get an old neglected tree back into fruiting. And so these are some of the things that will be covered in this tape. So let's get started. Let me show you some of the tools of the trade as we're for you pruners. First of all, let's start out with some stuff we use for small cuts, and we'll go out to larger cuts, work our way through larger cuts. There's two types of hand pruners which we use for smaller cuts. The anvil type is used commonly for beginners. However, there's limitations with it, and it's harder to get closer to the branch, but it crushes the branch and is quite comfortable for many. The bypass type has more flexibility. You have rotating handles. The blades are interchangeable, and you can get closer on smaller cuts with the bypass. It also comes in left and right-handed models. We also have the loppers, which are also bypass type, but they come in anvil type as well. They normally come with shearing type action on the bypass, and you come with a bumper pad, which is for comfort to the shoulders if you're doing a lot of pruning. Loppers are most useful for branches up to 1 inch in diameter. For the saw, we have two different types. We have the folding type saw and ones that don't fold. I recommend folding for its convenience, but also the main thing about a saw is to get one with large teeth so they don't get bound up along the teeth as you're making the cross cuts. Saws are used for limbs larger than 1 inch in diameter. Next we'll look at spreaders. There's two types. We have wood and plastic. First of all, we'll look at the wood. They can be used for small and large ones. We put a nail on each end and grind it off. For the smaller limbs, first we like to use the plastic type spreaders, and I wouldn't recommend to use them only for the smaller limbs because they will break on larger ones. The large limbs, we should use the stiffer wooden type. Next, we also have weights, which we can make ourselves out of concrete, and we embed wire in the concrete with a clothespin. Here we open the thing up and we put it on a limb, and the weight of the concrete bends the limb down. There are two types of ties, black tubing and cord. Tubing is easier on the tree. It doesn't cut into it as much. When cutting with a saw, either a hand saw or a chainsaw, first of all we want to cut a portion of the limb to make the rest of it easier to manage and prevent tearing. Get that piece of limb out of there, and so we have a smaller piece to work with. Next we want to find the collar, the portion of regenerative tissues like on the one above that will heal over and give proper healing. So you don't want to cut too close. You want to about a 1/4 inch. Make an undercut first, and then this prevents tearing of the bark as you make the overcut.
Now with just a portion of a stub left, it makes it easier to handle as we're cutting, and even on larger limbs. And so as we cut through, there will be no bark tearing. Here you can see I'm able to hold this with one hand and prevent any tearing, and we have a nice clean cut and a nice collar left, so they'll heal like this the following year.
Don't leave a long stub to dry up and die, and don't cut deeply across the collar, making it harder to heal.
Here's a cut that's been properly done after 1 year, and here's one that has been fully healed. Here we have a bad crotch angle, and we use our bypass pruners on this young shoot to cut it off. Get in close with the bypass pruners and make our cut as close as we possibly can. Here we have a wide angle crotch, which is what we want, is desirable, and as it gets older it'll be strong.
And what we're doing here now is letting more sunshine in. We'll cut some of this stuff right out of there. And now we let more light into the thing. We can continue to spread that limb further and further. You're better to spread that limb also while it's quite young. Here we'll see, you can see that's real stiff. We'll get another spreader here. This one right here is a lot more flexible. See, we can use the angle of that and bend it a lot easier. And so you're probably a lot better doing this at a younger stage, so you can get your proper branch angle. As they become older and stiffer, they become harder and harder to spread.
Before we actually start to cut, let's take a look at how a tree is established. A tree is established like a building, one story at a time.
A branch that is knee-high on a newly planted young tree will still be knee-high when the tree is 15 years old. That branch will get thicker every year and will get longer and put out side branches, but like a story of a building, will still be at the same height from the ground. If we don't prune it, more branches form and crowd each other out, shading the inside of the tree. What we're doing when we prune is to open the tree to light. Light is essential for good fruit production.
Tree growth is influenced by an internal hormone which is influenced by gravity.
A branch that is positioned vertically grows the strongest, while a horizontal branch grows much less vigorously and begins to produce fruit. Growth is usually most vigorous at the tip or terminal end of a branch, since normally it is the most vertical. The flatter the angle of a branch, that is, the closer to the horizontal, the more it is influenced to produce fruit. That's why spreading and tying of limbs causes them to produce fruit sooner, by changing the hormone balance along the branch. If the tip of a branch is bent down in an arch, then the bud at the highest point of the arch takes over and begins growing upward. The balance between growth and fruitfulness is what we work toward in pruning.
Let's take a closer look at one branch.
At the tip is the new 1-year-old wood with its leaf buds that grew over last summer. A small ring of bark marks the point where the previous season's growth stopped. Beyond it is 2-year wood, and so on back to where the first branch originated at the trunk. On the 2-year wood are side branches and fruit spurs. This branch is typical of apple, pear, cherry, and plum trees, showing 1-year wood, 2-year wood, leaf buds, fruit buds, and fruit spurs.
Peach, nectarine, and to some extent apricot are a little bit different.
They bear the fruit on shoots that grew last year. Here you see we have the plump buds are the fruit buds, and the small narrow buds are the leaf buds. This is true on all fruit trees.
Okay, the first thing to remember when you're pruning is that only 2 kinds of cuts can be made. If you got that you're on your way to pruning.
The most important cut to remember to make is the thinning cut. That means removing the entire shoot back to its point of origin, like right here. When in doubt, you thin out. This is versus a heading cut, which means moving a portion of a branch, like right here.
Here we have an example of thinning versus heading on 1-year shoots. In thinning, we remove unwanted shoots completely. We can remove one-year shoots, side branches, or entire limbs. Heading, on the other hand, means cutting off part of a shoot or branch, either back to a side branch, called a lateral, or to a fruit spur. If you make the majority of cuts, at least 90% thinning cuts, you will be successful at pruning your trees. Thinning out and removing crowded branches lets light into the tree, and light promotes more fruit buds. Also, the branch that you leave unheaded will form fruit buds along its length as well as new growth from the tip buds. Heading cuts do just the opposite. A branch that is headed channels the same amount of growth into fewer buds. This results in vigorous vegetative growth, that is, leafy shoots with few or no fruit buds that crowd and shade the tree. So keep in mind the simple rule: when in doubt, thin out, and you will have good results pruning any kind of fruit tree. You will not use many heading cuts. We head the leader of a young tree to encourage vigorous branching, and sometimes head a long branch that is already fruiting. Head back to a fruit bud or to a lateral on 2-year or older wood. Heading back to older wood produces much less new growth than heading new shoots. The key to developing a productive tree is to make sure that every limb you leave on the tree has plenty of light available and isn't shaded by some other limb above it. Try to see the branch as it will be when leaves are on it. If the tree still looks crowded, then thin some more.
Let's take a look at a branch section right here. See, we just go in there and just start thinning out. See how I'm just removing one limb at a time? Thin. All those are taking branches back to their point of origin. You want to thin out. If in doubt, you thin out. Don't head like this. See? Don't head. That is not the thing you want to do because you cause more branches. See, I'm taking it all the way out now. Just thin. Continue to thin. And you'll have good luck in getting fruit. See how we're just opening that middle up as we thin out. It is nice and clear, and this looks a lot better. Remember, just continue to look down that limb and thin. See how we're just thinning those out? Don't leave a lot of headed shoots like this. It only produces thick vegetation, where thinning type cuts promote fruit and open the tree to light.
If we begin by establishing a sound framework from the start, then when the tree grows up, it will keep that same good form. The two basic systems of training fruit trees are the open center and the central leader. The central leader also includes variations like trellis or espalier, any system where the main structure is a single upright trunk. The open center was used in past years because it was a good way to keep big, vigorous trees low enough for easy picking. It's still the common method for training peaches, apricots, and plums.
Now we just got a tree from the nursery. We want to establish our open center system. What we want to do is make a cut and select our scaffolds that we want.
Begin first by selecting 3 to 4 scaffold limbs. They will be our permanent framework for the tree later on. Here we're going to cut our leader out of the tree. We also do some thinning out of unwanted branches that are not going to be our permanent scaffolds. Now you see we've selected our 4 set of scaffolds. These things will never get any higher off the ground, as you can see, and they'll just grow thicker every year, as we showed you earlier.
Let's look at a diagram of what we did. On a newly planted nursery tree, we selected 4 scaffolds. We cut out the leader and any strong vertical shoots and thinned out low and unwanted branches. When choosing a tree from the nursery, try to select one that is well branched. If your new tree has no branches, then head the whip about a foot above where you want the branches to develop. Next year, when the side shoots branch out, select the ones you want, as we did with this one.
Okay, now we've got a tree that's approximately a year older than the one we just pruned. This tree here still has some new young shoots that have coming out, and we still may have to make some selections in the scaffold at this age.
Here we have several shoots coming up, which we need to select our final scaffolds. scaffold positioning is very important, so we can use our spreaders to help position them.
Sometimes the second year we still need to position our scaffolds, and spreaders helps us to do that. After we have positioned our scaffolds, thin them out. When in doubt, thin out. Now we need to go up and also establish our ladder bays so that we can cut out and walk up to the center part of the tree. Any crossovers. And then we go along the scaffolds and thin them out. The crowded branches. See how I cut back all the way back, thinned it completely out. Going right up the side of the scaffold here and thin out branches. You'll always get fruit if you thin out branches.
Now, the center is open to sunlight. Each individual branch I look at, will it have enough light when I'm finished, when it has leaves on it? Will it be shading another branch below it? If it looks like it will, then I need to thin out just a little bit more.
Okay, this tree is finished. Now let's recap what we just did.
Looking at our diagram, we established scaffolds, thinned out the lateral shoots on them, and kept the center open.
Okay, now we got our established tree. This is the one we showed you in the beginning.
You can see the scaffolds are well established on this tree, and they never got any higher off the ground, as you can see in this close-up here. We work up each scaffold. Also, we need to open the center of the tree first.
A lot of times, as we're thinning down the scaffolds, you see many of the shoots growing into the center of the tree. We have to keep that center open, so we just thin out the shoots that are growing toward the middle. Here you see that it's just mostly thinning type cuts are made. To maintain it, we must keep the center open to light and thin out the new growth to keep it fruiting. Work on the scaffolds one at a time, thinning out excess branches. When the upper limbs grow too tall, head them back to an older lateral that is lower. Always keep in mind that we prune while the tree is dormant over the winter. There are no leaves, so you have to picture how the leaves will shade around that branch and thin out accordingly.
As you work up a scaffold, you just continue to thin out. You let light in. I continue to work up here. You notice most of my cuts are thinning cuts. You have a good view here on the skylight. Here, you look up there and you thin out more branches, particularly ones that are coming back in, little shoots. Again, you sometimes can make a little bit larger cut. Each cut opens it up more to light. Here we go, open it up a little bit more. You see how it just kind of opened the profile of that whole branch. We're getting up higher and higher. The whole thing is just working up a scaffold and thinning it out as you go. Also, when you want to establish the height of a tree, you finally cut it back to a side lateral so that it will, you can maintain the height of these trees by every year cutting it back to a side lateral. Just continue to thin out. Okay, now we're going to, as we mentioned earlier, establish our tops. You see how I just cut back to a side lateral here with our loppers, and we're establishing the height of the tree when we're up in the top of that. We've worked up that scaffold limb, and now we're establishing the height of that tree. Again, right here, you see I'll make another cut and establish it back to a lateral. Now I continue to thin those side shoots out as I go. Here I have small twigs, and so I'm going to put my loppers away and start using my hand bypass pruners, which makes it easy to get around up in these smaller shoots, such as this peach tree. So you just go along, and you see I'm just thinning out, cutting back to laterals, thinning out those shoots. So whenever you want to establish the height of a tree, you cut back to a side lateral shoot, and you work and you thin that branch out. Thinning in the tops is very important to prevent shading in the bottom, so thin heavy on the tops, and if you continue to thin, you let light in and you'll get abundant fruit. Thinning is very important in getting fruit.
One big cut saves lots of little cuts. Now the tree is finished. The individual scaffolds are thinned out, the center is open, and the remaining shoots are thinned. The central leader system has been shown to be the most light-efficient tree training method. The scaffold limbs are arranged in tiers like a pyramid or a Christmas tree on a single central trunk. Viewed from above, you see the 4 limbs of each tier are ideally oriented at right angles to form an X. Space should be kept open between these main scaffold branches for ladder bays, allowing easy access to the center of the tree. The branches of the lowest tier angle up at about 45 degrees from the vertical. As the tree grows, a second tier is selected about 3 to 4 feet above the first one so the bottom tier gets enough light. The top of the tree is kept smaller and less vigorous so that it doesn't shade out the lower scaffolds. The second tier should be more horizontal, about 60 degrees, and if there is a third tier, its branches should be kept close to horizontal, 90 degrees. The purpose of this positioning is to maintain vigor in the lowest part of the tree and reduce it in the top. If a limb needs to be invigorated, tie it up to a steeper angle. If it is too vigorous, bend it down with ties or spreaders. Since the most vigorous growth is usually in the top, keep more of the top branches thinned out.
This is an unpruned new planted tree we have here, and we're going to eliminate some of the side shoots. But again, we got to, in our mind, select 4 that we want, at least 4, and probably leave 5 or 6, and let them fruit up temporarily on these. So we see these things here are way too low, so I'll probably thin them out. I won't come in and hit them, I'll thin them completely out. This is just too low. Gets in the way of your lawnmower or all kinds of things. And the rest of them we can leave here this year. Next year, but in our mind, we want to maintain those 4 set of scaffolds. Eventually we'll probably start eliminating this one and this one. And keep these 4 right there. We come in here into our leader and hit it about 15 inches above the last lateral branch so that we can get side shoot growth and we can get continued extension growth as well. This way we continue to build, as we explained earlier, our next set of scaffolds, which will eventually, as the tree is old, will probably be 3 to 4 feet above this lateral at one day. That's all we need to do this year.
Before we go on to our second-year tree, let's take a look at our one-year tree and how it will look 5 years down the road. Those scaffolds will be thicker, you can see, and they'll still be the same distance from the ground. But those original 4 scaffolds that we selected will continue to get thicker and thicker, and we'll have to continue to thin them each year.
Okay, here we got right after a year after planting, a couple years after planting, what it looks like. We got our scaffolds established. This is what they look like when we selected them the first year. From here to right here. They were a 1-year shoot. They look just like this last year, this far. We did not head those. And you can see we had the terminal end of the shoot grow, and we set fruit buds all along the way. We'll have some fruit on this thing this year. It's a young tree. And we did the same thing on each one of our 4 scaffolds. This one. This scaffold did not take off quite as well, but yet it still has some fruit hanging on it, and we just got to maintain the integrity of it, keep it tied up, and it'll do just fine. Okay, so now what we want to do is make sure those scaffolds stay in a good position. We want to eliminate any competition for this one right here. We have some competition there, and we want to maybe tie this one up. That's all we need to do on them coming up. We want to stop these. Don't want these things to put any light, inhibit any light from coming into our main scaffold. We're also starting to establish our ladder base. This one right here is coming across in our ladder bay. We could just let this one fruit up this year, but we got plenty of fruit on it already. So we just may come in here and just eliminate that one this year. Here we'll eliminate this one up just a little way. This one's not being inhibited at all. we could even select some temporarily scaffolds up here that could fruit up. We'll thin them out now. We want to take the strong one though. If I have a preference, see this one's stronger than this one, I want to keep the weaker ones on the top and take the stronger one out. See this one's coming up here very strong, competing with the leader. So we'll come up here and we'll take that one out, and then we'll head our leader about 15 inches above the last year's head, or the top layer of branches. Now look around at it, and that's really just about all we have to do. After this scaffold right here, we should take this one coming back in. Just going to shade it out, and this lower one here.
Let's review. Our chosen scaffolds are beginning to develop and set fruit. We now can thin out shoots on the main scaffolds of the bottom tier. Start selecting branches for the second tier and train the limbs to open out using weights, spreaders, or tie downs. In the top, thin out shoots that compete with the leader. Head the leader. Mature central leader tree, established on 3 tiers, can be maintained with basic annual thinning of the scaffold limbs.
What we have here is about a 4-year-old central leader trained tree. Now, as we see down the road a little bit, we've let some of those temporary bottom scaffolds fruit up, but now they're at the point where we need to remove some of them, thin some of them out, and make sure our main scaffolds are established. Here we have, first of all, we have to look and get our ladder base first, be able to get up to the tree.
Okay, now as we look at this, the scaffolds also, we've had some temporary scaffolds that we have to get rid of. So we'll come up and look and see which ones we want to keep. We'll keep this one, that one, select 4, that one, and one on the other side. We'll select 4, going out to 4 different directions, and then we'll start removing some of those temporary branches. Here we have one right above the other, which we'll completely thin out because it's just too close, and it'll be shading that lower branch out. Let's remove some of these temporary scaffolds first. If we want to establish our scaffolds, establish those lower scaffolds, work our way around the tree, and make sure they're positioned in at 45-degree angles. Some of them will show you we'll have to tie up. Now let's use a saw to cut the bigger limbs out. Remember, take your bigger cuts, remove those temporary scaffolds if you still have them, and keep your 4 main ones. You need to open up ladder base so you can walk up to the tree here too. See, this one here is inhibiting me from walking up to the tree. So we remove that out. Then those competing shoots up and see how I can get up right close to the tree here. Now we'll just keep working around. Also, we see we have some crossovers. So let's kind of thin down a scaffold a little bit. You see I thinned some of those branches out as I'm working down that far scaffold. Just thin them out, thin those upright shoots particularly that are going to inhibit light coming in. Here we're thinning out one that's inhibiting a ladder bay. See, I still can walk up to the tree, see? That's what I want to do, be able to walk on every side of every scaffold, get up to close to that tree. Work my way around the tree, and again, open the ladder bays up, and make sure I'm establishing my scaffolds as I'm going, getting light in that bottom part of the tree. I also want to maintain the continuity of the tree. A lot of these ones here, you see I'm cutting back. It seems like I'm heading in. When I'm heading, I'm heading back to 2-year wood in some of those cases, back to a fruit bud as well. But I'm opening up my ladder base here, working my way around the whole tree, opening up the ladder base so I can get up to the tree and establishing those 4 set of scaffolds. Now I proceed to thin down that scaffold. Just keep working down that scaffold, thinning out crossing over branches, and thinning out crowded branches. You can head back a lot of times into back to a fruit bud, but there's a lot of crossover branches. You also have to maintain the continuity of the branch, which you'll see up here. You see I'm thinning here. I'm still thinning out crowded branches. Up here a little higher, you see that one, that strong one veering off to the right is kind of losing the continuity of the branch. We're about ready to come to it. I'm thinning out here as I'm going. Thinning out the crossovers. Working up another scaffold here. Now this one right here, the continuity is wrong. I want to cut that one back to a fruit bud and keep the continuity of the branch going just right as well. Now that has a good angle coming up, a good 45-degree angle on those bottom branches to keep it nice and strong. And now we need to proceed to thin out crowded branches. And some of that I just thin back to a fruit bud there. Thinning some of the, see how I'm thinning extra shoots out. And all those have leaves and flower and fruit on them. They'll be quite crowded there, so you got to keep thinning out. When in doubt, you thin out as you go down that branch. Now sometimes we have a weak limb that has not been invigorated. You can see this one's flat. Just like we spread a limb to make it weaker, we can tie up a branch to make it stronger. Particularly on those bottom ones, we need to tie them up and invigorate them. And here we are tying one up.
Vigorous branches in the upper tier should be cut back to a less vigorous shoot or thinned entirely out. Remove upright shoots that compete with the leader. Don't let the upper scaffolds outgrow the lower ones. Keep the tree in a pyramid shape. Make sure that side branches are properly thinned on all your scaffolds. A variation of the center leader that's especially useful on narrow sites is the trellis or espalier. It can be used along walls or fence lines. This produces a tree that is basically two-dimensional, and because it is so narrow, light penetrates easily all through the tree, making it very productive. The scaffold limbs can be trained horizontally, as in the classic espalier, or in a fan shape, with the main scaffold limbs going up at 45-degree angles.
An espalier tree, about being able to do something along your fence line. It is another modified system from a central leader. We still have a central leader, except instead of having three-dimensional, we kind of keep it two-dimensional. In fact, we're kind of keeping it in a north-south orientation, and we have very little coming out into the east-west orientation. When we start with a tree, we have a new tree, kind of just like we want a central leader.
Now with that new tree, we have to select our scaffolds, and they have to be in a north-south orientation. So we take a look at that tree, the feathers, which one do we want to keep? And we want to have those come up at 45-degree angles. So we need to position the tree as such. As we look at it, we'll grab those ones we want to select and start tying them to the wire. Don't tie them too tight where you're strangling the branch, but make sure there's adequate support. Since we have these new scaffolds being held up by the wire, we can load them up with more fruit and fruit them earlier without getting them out of position or breaking them. We can also tie some temporary scaffold to the wire and fruit them up as well, but we want to maintain our main lower scaffolds. Again, remember, don't tie these branches too tight or strangle them. Now we have some temporary branches that we may want to keep as well. These ones we want to tie to the wire. We can bend ones over that are aiming out in the row because they're very flexible when a tree is young. This is the best time to do it, and tie them to the wire for support. These things will fruit up next year and give us a little extra fruit, reduce our pruning. So tie those to the wire. Whatever we keep, tie to the wire. Again, we'll do that same thing on the other side. Bend one over to the wire, temporary branch, and tie it to the wire as well. You see the ones above them, the ones that are at 45, those will be the ones we want to keep. That will be our permanent scaffolds. And so as long as the permanent scaffolds aren't shading these things out, let's get a little extra fruit. Now as we look through it, tie our main permanent scaffolds we're going to keep up to maybe even the second wire if they extend that far. And then now start thinning out the ones we do not need. Anything that's not tied to the wire, we need to thin out. Just go up, thin the ones out we don't want. Keep thinning. We have 4 sets. We go up and head our leader, and we're done.
Let's look at the diagram. Select 2 limbs to be the major scaffolds and tie them to the wire. 2 more side branches can be tied to the wire and left to fruit as long as the upper branches don't shade them out. Thin out unneeded branches, especially any strong ones that compete with the leader. Head the leader just above the wire.
Now we're coming to a Espalier tree that you just seen a few years down the road. Here you see that some of those ones that we've left unheaded here have produced a lot of fruit buds. And right at the terminal end, they're producing vigorous shoots. We need to keep the vigor on this one up, so we're going to have to, the position of this thing will relate to the vigor. So if we position it up a more and tie it here, we'll get better vigor. To keep the vigor of that bottom set of scaffolds is what we want to do. We're kind of losing a little vigor in this one right here, so we may want to position it, or either that or position this one up and use this one as our main scaffold. So we're going to have to position this one up so it maintains vigor. As we go to the top, we'll see we have some 1-year shoots. This one right here, if we leave it unheaded, we can flatten it, get it at a flatter angle, and keep that one. Just train it at the way we want it. This one here we should tie down so it loses its vigor. Now we got a couple strong ones that we just should definitely take out. This one's a strong one. We don't want a strong one up in the top. We want to keep dominance down to the bottom if we can. So we'll remove that one completely, thin it out. And we'll thin this other one out, and just leave a leader here.
As the framework of the trellis branches continues to grow, thin out lateral side branches that develop along the scaffolds. Select new limbs for the upper scaffolds and tie them to the wire. Eliminate strong shoots in the top and head the leader.
Now here we have a mature Espalier tree. We've allowed a few things to happen, but as you can see, we've kept dominance in the bottom of the bottom scaffold branches. We kept them kind of coming up at 45-degree angles, as you can see. They're full of fruit buds. And as we went higher, we kind of would repress them more. This one right here probably maybe needs to be repressed a little bit more in a couple of years. We've got to watch that. You can just repress them according to how you adjust the angle. And as you go to the top, you see we have some flatter ones. And here's a stronger one here. So what you got to do is maintain that structure. We've also allowed into the row on the bottom set of scaffolds some kind of permanent scaffolds to come up. That is optional. If you wanted to keep it narrow, you just keep those things cut right off right here. Look down here. This one we have some 1-year shoots coming out, which we'll keep. Let them fruit up, but we'll keep those 1-year shoots coming out. Here we're going to cut into 2nd-year wood because we get a little bit of crossovers right there. Actually, probably one of them we may want to completely eliminate. They're kind of close together, so we'll eliminate one of those. We got some 1-year shoots here. We'll let fruit up, maybe cut back to fruit bud next year. And remember, these tiers can be a little bit closer together on these Espaliers because there isn't far for the light to come in. It's kind of a nice flat plane heading north-south direction. This one right here, we've left it unheaded and it set some fruit buds. But now it's getting too far out. It's going to start shading down here, so we'll cut back to one of these fruit buds and get the fruit this year on it. We don't want it to shade the bottom by any means. Now as we look to the other side here, we got some shoots in here that we probably may want to eliminate. It's just a kind of a thinning out process. Plenty of fruit in here, so we'll thin that out. We don't want to inhibit this one from being shaded, so we'll thin that out. Keep it nice and open. Here we got this going to come out. It's going to cause some shading problems here. We can either thin back to this lateral, which will fruit up next year, and possibly next year we may want to take that out. Okay, so we go up. We look at the top now. Here we're getting flatter angle limbs right here. This one's coming up too strong. We got 2 competing ones, so we'd rather keep the nice flat one. Take that one completely out of there. Here, we don't want it too strong. We'll just need 1 shoot to fruit up this year. Okay, now our top's starting to get pretty strong. You see some real strong shoots up here. We need to maybe head back to a weaker one and get rid of the strong ones. And we want to keep the flatter ones. Now there's two right here. Let's keep this little flatter one right here. And then we kind of suppress the top back. And basically that's all there is to the Espalier. If you happen to want a little bit more shade in a given area, you might want to head if you're getting real bad sunburn problems. But this type of system produces a lot of exposure to the fruit, which gives you a lot of fruit color when you're done. Good quality.
Sometimes we don't have the luxury of starting off from the beginning and shaping a tree the way we want to. Instead, we may inherit the long neglected problems left behind by someone else, and we end up with the monster in the backyard.
So what we have here is a neglected tree, one that has been hasn't been pruned for quite a while. You look at it and say, what do I do with it? Where do I start? Well, if we look back at our other principles, this is where you got to be an artist. You got to come in and say, well, this doesn't exactly fit into any particular form, but I'm going to have to create a form. I'm going to have to create a structure here. And then when I create that final structure, then I'll thin out my branches. Now, looking at this, you kind of think in your mind, well, which ones do I want to keep? What form might it might closely resemble? As I look at this tree, I kind of think of one and maybe it closely resembles, if I was to prune it, maybe to an open center in this case. I don't see any definite possibilities for a central leader, so I'm going to kind of create my own form. One is, and the scaffolds that I leave are going to be light efficient. So what I'm going to go in here first is just start out with is make my big cuts first. A few well-placed big cuts will do wonders here, as you'll see, and remove some entire branches, then some big scaffolds out of there, and then we'll start trying to establish a set of scaffoldings. Okay, when operating a chainsaw, chainsaw is a very dangerous piece of equipment. That's why I really recommend, if you don't know how to use it, to grow a dwarf tree so you don't have to use it, or don't neglect your tree, or have somebody else who's professional to use it. If you're going to use a chainsaw, do it according to the manufacturer's specifications. Again, I reiterate, it's a very dangerous piece of equipment, particularly when you're getting up on the ladder.
Begin with the larger cuts first. Make sure it will be balanced all around. Try to visualize where each limb goes and what the tree will look like after it is taken out. Don't be alarmed if you end up taking 5 or 6 major limbs out in order to open up the middle of the tree.
See, well, just what I've done so far is just with the chainsaw. I just thinned out the larger limbs and narrowed it down to fewer scaffolds. Now I'm ready to go along those scaffolds and clean them up a little bit, do a little bit of thinning out on the scaffolds, and I'm done. But just some well-placed cuts has really opened that tree up.
Cut back the tops of your chosen scaffold limbs to a less vigorous lateral to bring the top branches within reach for picking, and thin them out well to let the light in. Old trees like this are often full of low, unproductive hangers shaded out by the upper limbs. Thin out most of them and head the rest back to a fruit bud.
cut hard on the top part of the tree. These low hangers will often shade, so you need to cut these top hangers back far to let light into the bottom scaffolds.
Notice how thinning has opened up the right side of the tree. Thin out the stronger limbs in the top of the tree. Keep thinning out as you go along the scaffold. You can correct past mistakes and avoid future ones by continuing to make most of your cuts thinning cuts. All the large cuts we made on this tree were in thinning out unneeded branches. Even though it may seem that you have cut huge chunks out of the tree, in fact, there are plenty of fruit buds left. The fruit on them will be of much better quality when they are exposed to sunlight, and the tree will be healthier as well. You can see the amount of blossoms the tree has, enough to produce lots of fruit. To keep it from ever turning into a monster again, just continue to thin out the crowded branches after each year's new growth. Let's look at this old pear tree pruned to an umbrella shape. Again, make your big cuts first to define the shape. Thin out crowded limbs. Remove low hangers, thin out competing branches, and cut back side shoots to fruit buds.
I might be able to see some of this here. Here we go.
The same rules apply to larger trees pruned in this so-called umbrella system. Looking at a single scaffold, we see water shoots or suckers, some productive branches, and hangers that are shaded out. The most common mistake people make is to head all the vertical shoots, or to head main branches to stubs. This results in a crowded mass of new one-year shoots the following season. Fruit production is reduced and leafy growth is increased. The correct way to prune is to thin out 90% of the new shoots, get rid of hangers, and give the productive limbs more space. This discourages excessive shoot growth and lets the remaining shoots become fruitful. The aim of this video has been to simplify and explain fruit tree pruning so that anyone can feel confident enough to go out and prune a fruit tree successfully. The two basic elements of pruning are first to establish a scaffold framework for the tree, establish the scaffolds, then make sure each scaffold gets enough light and that the lateral branches on it are well thinned. Just remember this, the key to effective pruning is thinning. Thin out lateral branches. Make most of your cuts thinning cuts. as I've shown you here, and you won't go wrong. Even the worst trees can be tamed when you keep this rule in mind. When in doubt, thin out. Pruning is not a mysterious process. It can be an adventure in gardening, and it can make an artist out of you as well.